The rain hammered against the windows of O'Malley's bar and grill like bullets against armor plating. Commander Sarah Chen sat alone at the corner booth, her civilian clothes deliberately chosen to blend in with the crowd of off-duty military personnel who frequented this establishment near Camp Pendleton. The black jeans, simple white blouse, and worn leather jacket gave no hint of the gold oak leaves that would soon adorn her uniform collar, or the weight of command that would rest on her shoulders in just 48 hours. She stirred her coffee absently, watching the steam rise in delicate spirals while her mind processed the events of the past 6 months. The Pentagon briefing. The psychological evaluations. The endless meetings with Joint Chiefs who questioned whether a woman could handle the most elite Special Operations Unit in the Marine Corps. Tomorrow, she would stand before SEAL Team Bravo and assume command of 24 of the deadliest warriors the military had ever produced. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was spending her last night of anonymity in a bar filled with Marines who had no idea they were about to serve under the first female commander in SEAL Team history. The official announcement wouldn't come until tomorrow morning's formation, but word had a way of traveling fast in military circles. She expected resistance. She expected doubt. What she didn't expect was to become the target of harassment before she even put on her uniform. "Mind if we join you, sweetheart?" The voice cut through her thoughts like a rusty knife. Sarah looked up to see 3 Marines standing beside her booth, their dress blues indicating they'd just come from some formal function. The one who'd spoken was a tall, broad-shouldered man with sergeant's stripes and an expression that suggested he viewed women as entertainment rather than equals. "Actually, I'd prefer to sit alone," Sarah replied calmly, her voice carrying just enough authority to make most people back down. These 3 weren't most people. "Ah, come on now," the sergeant said, sliding into the booth across from her without invitation. His 2 companions flanked him, effectively trapping her in the corner. "A pretty little thing like you shouldn't be drinking alone. Name's Sergeant Mike Torres. These are my buddies, Corporal Jackson and Private Rodriguez." Sarah's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She'd dealt with men like Torres throughout her career, men who saw her gender before her rank, who assumed that because she was attractive, she must be weak. It was a mistake that had cost more than one Marine his career. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm really not interested in company," she said, her tone remaining professional despite the irritation building in her chest. Torres leaned back in the booth, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made Sarah's skin crawl. "You know what I think? I think you're just playing hard to get. Most women love the attention of real Marines. We just got back from deployment in Afghanistan. Been gone 8 months. A man gets lonely, you know?" The other 2 Marines chuckled at their friend's crude attempt at charm. Sarah noticed how Jackson's hand rested near his beer bottle, how Rodriguez's eyes kept scanning the room as if looking for witnesses or threats. These weren't just random drunk Marines hitting on a woman. There was something calculated about their approach, something that set off every alarm bell in Sarah's tactical mind. "I'm sure you did your country proud," Sarah said, her voice carrying just enough sincerity to avoid escalation while she assessed her options. The booth put her at a tactical disadvantage, but the crowd provided both cover and witnesses. More importantly, she recognized at least 3 off-duty MPs scattered throughout the bar, men and women she'd worked with during joint training exercises. "Oh, we did more than that," Torres said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You want to hear some real war stories? Buy us around, and I'll tell you about the time we took out an entire Taliban compound with nothing but our bare hands and a couple of grenades." Sarah had read enough after-action reports to know that Torres was either exaggerating wildly or outright lying. Real operators didn't brag about their missions to strangers in bars. They certainly didn't use them as pickup lines. But she also knew that calling him out would only escalate the situation. "That's quite a story," she said diplomatically. "But I really should be going." She started to stand, but Torres's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to make his point clear. "Now hold on there, darling. We haven't even gotten to the good part yet. You strike me as a woman who appreciates a man in uniform. A real man who knows how to handle himself in a fight. His grip tightened slightly, and Sarah felt the familiar surge of combat readiness that had kept her alive through 2 deployments in Iraq and countless training exercises. "Let go of my wrist," she said quietly, her voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded violence. Torres laughed, apparently mistaking her composure for fear. "Or what? You going to call for help? Look around, sweetheart. This is a Marine bar. We take care of our own here." What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but Sarah's mind processed it with the clarity that came from years of training and combat experience. Torres's grip was strong, but he was holding her right wrist with his right hand, which put him at a mechanical disadvantage. Rodriguez was starting to stand, probably thinking he needed to help restrain her. Jackson was reaching for something in his jacket pocket, which could be a phone or something worse. Sarah's left hand moved in a smooth, practiced motion, pressing down on Torres's thumb while twisting her wrist in a direction his joint couldn't follow. The pain was immediate and intense, forcing him to release her while trying to pull his hand away. But Sarah wasn't done. Her right hand, now free, grabbed his wrist and pulled him forward while her left elbow drove into the pressure point just below his shoulder. Torres yelped in pain and surprise, his body automatically trying to get away from the source of discomfort. But Sarah controlled his movement, using his own momentum to slam his face into the table hard enough to rattle the coffee cups but not hard enough to break his nose. "Yet. I said let go," she repeated, her voice still calm but now carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Rodriguez was fully standing now, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. "Hey! Get your hands off him, you crazy, sit down, Corporal." The command cut through the ambient noise of the bar like a blade. Sarah's voice carried the kind of authority that made even seasoned Marines automatically straighten to attention. Rodriguez found himself halfway back to his seat before his conscious mind caught up with his body's instinctive response to a superior officer's command. Jackson, meanwhile, had frozen with his hands still in his jacket. Sarah's eyes fixed on him with the intensity of a sniper acquiring a target. "Slowly," she said. "Very slowly, show me what's in your pocket." Jackson's face had gone pale. Whatever he'd been reaching for, it wasn't a phone. With exaggerated care, he withdrew a small digital camera, the kind used for taking compromising photos without permission. The pieces fell into place in Sarah's mind with sickening clarity. This wasn't random harassment. This was a setup. 3 Marines, probably acting on orders or at least encouragement from someone higher up the chain of command, had targeted her specifically. They'd planned to get her drunk, compromise her, and photograph the results. By tomorrow morning, those photos would be circulating through every military base on the West Coast, undermining her authority before she even assumed command. "You picked the wrong woman, gentlemen," Sarah said, applying just enough pressure to Torres's trapped arm to keep him compliant. "The question now is whether this was your idea or if someone put you up to it." Torres tried to lift his head, but Sarah's grip kept him pinned. "I don't know what you're talking about, lady. We were just trying to be friendly." "Friendly," Sarah repeated. "Is that what you call photographing women without their consent? I wonder what your commanding officer would think about that. Or the MPs. Or the local police, for that matter." The fear that flashed across Jackson's face told her everything she needed to know. These 3 weren't criminal masterminds. They were tools, used by someone smart enough to stay out of the bar while they did the dirty work. "Here's what's going to happen," Sarah continued, her voice never rising above conversational level despite the drama playing out in their corner booth. "Jackson is going to delete every photo on that camera and, then, smash it on the floor. Rodriguez is going to sit there quietly and think about how his career might survive this if he cooperates. And Torres is going to tell me exactly who sent you here tonight." "Nobody sent us anywhere," Torres mumbled into the table. "We came here to drink and relax. Met you. Thought you were cute. That's it." Sarah sighed and applied a little more pressure to the nerve cluster in his shoulder. Torres's entire left side went numb, and he couldn't suppress a grunt of pain. "Let me explain something to you, Sergeant. I've spent the last 10 years learning how to extract information from people who are much tougher and much better trained than you. I can keep you in this position all night, and, to anyone watching, it will look like we're just having an intimate conversation. But, every 5 minutes, the pressure on those nerves is going to increase. In about 20 minutes, you'll start losing feeling in your left arm permanently. She was bluffing about the permanent damage, but Torres didn't know that. More importantly, the cold, clinical way she described the process convinced him that she knew exactly what she was doing. Okay, he gasped. Look, I don't know his name, all right? Some officer approached us at the commissary this afternoon. Said there was a woman who'd be here tonight, described what you'd be wearing. Said she was a troublemaker who needed to be taught a lesson about knowing her place. What did he look like? I don't know, man. Average height, brown hair, wore a flight suit with captain's bars. Aviator sunglasses even though we were indoors. Said if we could get some compromising photos, there might be something in it for us. Extra liberty, maybe a good word on our fitness reports. Sarah filed the description away for later investigation. A Marine captain with access to her schedule and enough authority to promise favorable treatment to enlisted men. That narrowed the field considerably. Did he give you a name? Anything to identify him? Called himself Captain Smith, but that was obviously fake. Listen, we weren't going to hurt you or anything. Just some photos, maybe get you drunk enough to look bad. Nothing serious. The casual way he dismissed assault and attempted blackmail told Sarah everything she needed to know about Torres's character. These weren't good Marines led astray by a corrupt officer. These were predators who'd found someone willing to aim them at a target. She released the pressure on Torres's shoulder and let him sit up, but kept her posture ready for immediate action. All 3 men were studying her now with new respect and more than a little fear. Jackson, the camera, she reminded him. With shaking hands, Jackson deleted the photos and then, following Sarah's gesture, dropped the camera on the floor and crushed it under his boot. Now, Sarah said, you're going to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because your future careers depend on it. Tomorrow morning, you're going to find yourselves in front of your commanding officer's desk, confessing to attempted assault and conspiracy to commit blackmail. You're going to provide detailed statements about the officer who recruited you, including everything you remember about his appearance and what he promised you. But that will end our careers, Rodriguez protested. Your careers ended the moment you decided to target me, Sarah replied. The only question now is whether you go down for assault and blackmail, or whether you help catch the person who sent you and maybe salvage something from this mess. Torres rubbed his shoulder, trying to restore feeling to his arm. And if we don't cooperate? Sarah smiled, and all 3 Marines unconsciously leaned away from her. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Then, tomorrow afternoon, when I'm officially announced as the new commanding officer of SEAL Team Bravo, one of my first acts will be to launch a formal investigation into tonight's events. I have witnesses, physical evidence, and 3 confessions obtained under duress but admissible in a court-martial. How do you think that's going to play out for you? The silence that followed was broken only by the ambient noise of the bar around them. Gradually, the magnitude of their mistake was sinking in. They'd attempted to blackmail and compromise a SEAL team commander. Even if they'd succeeded, even if they'd obtained compromising photos, their careers would have been over the moment she assumed command and recognized them. You're the new SEAL commander? Jackson whispered. Tomorrow I am. Tonight, I'm just a woman trying to have a quiet cup of coffee before taking on one of the most challenging assignments in the Marine Corps. You gentlemen decided to make that impossible. Torres was staring at her with something approaching awe. Jesus Christ. We tried to mess with a SEAL commander. The first female SEAL commander, Sarah corrected. Which means I've already proven I can handle anything you 3 amateurs could throw at me. The question now is whether you're smart enough to cut your losses and help me find the person who used you as pawns in whatever game he's playing. She stood up from the booth, and all 3 Marines automatically started to rise as well before catching themselves. Old habits died hard, and their instinctive response to a superior officer's movement had kicked in despite the civilian clothes. "I'm going to finish my coffee at the bar," Sarah said. "You three are going to sit here and think very carefully about what you want your next move to be. If you're smart, you'll realize that cooperating with me is your only chance of salvaging your careers. If you're stupid, you'll try to leave or cause more trouble, and I'll make sure you're in the brig before midnight." She turned and walked to the bar, feeling their eyes on her back but knowing they wouldn't try anything else. The revelation of her identity had shifted the entire dynamic. They'd gone from predators targeting what they thought was helpless prey to enlisted men who'd just assaulted their future commanding officer's peer. The bartender, a retired Navy chief who'd been watching the entire encounter with professional interest, poured her a fresh cup of coffee without being asked. "Hell of a thing," he said quietly. "Those boys picked the wrong target tonight." "Yes, they did," Sarah agreed. "The question is whether they're smart enough to learn from their mistake." She sipped her coffee and watched the three Marines in the booth's reflection in the mirror behind the bar. They were huddled together in intense conversation, their faces grave as the full implications of their situation sank in. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of her authority and competence. But tonight had reminded her why she'd been chosen for this command. Not just because she was the most qualified candidate, but because she had the strength and skill to handle whatever obstacles were placed in her path. Behind her, she heard Torres call her name. When she turned around, all three Marines were standing at attention beside their booth. "Ma'am," Torres said, his voice formal and respectful for the first time all evening. "We'd like to cooperate with your investigation. We'll report to our CO first thing in the morning and provide full statements about tonight's events and the officer who approached us." Sarah nodded acknowledgement but didn't smile. They were doing what they should have done from the beginning, what honor and integrity demanded. That didn't erase their actions or make them heroes. "See that you do, Sergeant. And, gentlemen? When you see me again tomorrow, you'll address me as ma'am or Commander Chen." Tonight's familiarity was a one-time exception under unusual circumstances. "Yes, ma'am," all three responded in unison. As they filed out of the bar, Sarah returned to her coffee and her thoughts. Somewhere on this base, a Marine captain was waiting for photos that would never come, planning to use them in a campaign to undermine her before she even took command. It was a clever plan, actually. Discredit her personally before she could prove herself professionally. Make her seem weak, compromised, unfit for command. Too bad for him, he'd chosen the wrong woman and the wrong tools for the job. Tomorrow, she would begin the most challenging assignment of her career. But tonight had given her something valuable: early intelligence about the opposition she would face, and the knowledge that some of her future subordinates could be turned from enemies into allies with the right combination of strength and mercy. The rain continued to hammer against the windows, but inside O'Malley's bar and grill, Commander Sarah Chen sat quietly planning her next moves in a war she hadn't known she was fighting until tonight. Dawn broke over Camp Pendleton with the kind of crisp clarity that only came after a heavy rain. Commander Sarah Chen stood before the mirror in her temporary quarters, adjusting the oak leaves on her collar for what felt like the 100th time. Today was the day she'd worked toward for 15 years, but the events of last night had cast a shadow over what should have been the proudest moment of her career. The three Marines from O'Malley's had kept their word. At 0600 hours, Torres, Rodriguez, and Jackson had presented themselves to their commanding officer with full confessions. By 0630, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb was on the phone with Sarah, his voice tight with embarrassment and anger. "Commander Chen, I want to personally apologize for the conduct of my Marines last night. This is not representative of the Corps or the values we instill in our people." "I appreciate that, Colonel Webb," Sarah had replied. "But I'm more interested in finding the officer who orchestrated this than in punishing three enlisted men who were foolish enough to go along with it." "My sentiments exactly, ma'am. I've already initiated an investigation into this Captain Smith character. We'll find him." Now, 2 hours later, Sarah was preparing to face the most elite unit in the Marine Corps for the first time as their commander. SEAL Team Bravo consisted of 24 operators, each one hand-picked for their exceptional skills, unwavering loyalty, and ability to complete missions that others deemed impossible. They were about to meet their new commanding officer, and she knew that every one of them would be evaluating her from the moment she walked into the briefing room. The morning formation was scheduled for 0800 hours, but Sarah arrived at the SEAL compound at 0730 to familiarize herself with the layout and meet with her new executive officer, Major David Reeves. She'd read his file extensively, decorated veteran of 3 combat deployments, Purple Heart recipient, and, by all accounts, a solid leader who'd been running the team's day-to-day operations for the past 6 months while they waited for a new commander. The SEAL compound was a world apart from the rest of Camp Pendleton. Higher security, more modern facilities, and an atmosphere of quiet professionalism that spoke to the caliber of personnel who worked there. Sarah's footsteps echoed on the polished concrete as she made her way to the command building, already feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Major Reeves was waiting for her in the outer office, a tall man with prematurely gray hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. He stood as she entered, his salute crisp and professional. "Commander Chen, welcome to Team Bravo. I'm Major Reeves, your executive officer." "Thank you, Major. I've read your file. Impressive record. I'm looking forward to working with you." Reeves gestured toward the inner office. "I thought you might want a few minutes to review the current operational status before meeting the team. We've got a lot moving right now." Sarah followed him into what would be her office for the foreseeable future. Maps covered 3 walls, showing current and potential operational theaters around the globe. A bank of secure communications equipment hummed quietly in one corner. Most impressive, though, was the wall of photographs showing every member of SEAL Team Bravo, along with their specialties, qualifications, and current assignments. "Talk to me about the team, Major. Not what's in their files, but what I need to know as their commander." Reeves poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot that looked like it had been brewing since before dawn. "They're the best operators I've ever worked with, ma'am. But they're also skeptical by nature and slow to trust. They've heard the rumors about getting a female commander, and reactions are mixed." "Mixed how?" "About half are reserving judgment until they see you in action. They're professionals, and they understand that you wouldn't have been selected if you weren't qualified. The other half." Reeves paused, choosing his words carefully. "The other half think I'm a political appointment designed to advance the Pentagon's diversity agenda," Sarah finished. "I appreciate the honesty, Major. What's your opinion?" "I think you've got the background and the skills for this job, ma'am. I also think you're going to have to prove yourself in ways that a male commander wouldn't." "That's not fair, but it's reality." Sarah nodded. She'd expected as much. "What else should I know before I meet them?" "There's been some unusual activity in the past 48 hours. Questions about your background, your qualifications, your personal life. Someone's been digging for dirt." "Any idea who?" Reeves shook his head. "Whoever it is, they're being careful. But my people talk to me, ma'am. When strangers start asking questions about their new commanding officer, word gets back to me pretty quick." Sarah thought about the 3 Marines from last night and the mysterious Captain Smith who'd recruited them. "I may have some information about that, Major. Let's table it for now and focus on the team introduction." At precisely 0800 hours, Sarah walked into the main briefing room where SEAL Team Bravo was assembled. 24 of the most dangerous men she'd ever seen stood at attention, their eyes forward but their peripheral vision taking in every detail of her appearance, posture, and bearing. These weren't ordinary Marines who might be impressed by rank and authority. These were warriors who respected competence above all else. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room without the need for amplification. "I'm Commander Sarah Chen, your new commanding officer. For the next 2 years, your lives will be in my hands, and mine will be in yours. I want to establish a few things from the beginning." She moved from behind the podium, preferring to address them face to face rather than from a distance. "First, I didn't ask for this assignment because it would advance my career or make history. I asked for it because SEAL Team Bravo represents the pinnacle of what the Marine Corps can achieve, and I wanted to be part of that excellence. Second, I don't expect your respect simply because of my rank. I expect to earn it through my actions and decisions. Third, I won't pretend that my presence here isn't controversial. I know some of you have doubts about serving under a female commander. Those doubts are understandable, given that this is uncharted territory for all of us. She paused, making eye contact with several of the men in the front row. What I will not tolerate is those doubts affecting our operational readiness or the safety of our missions. When we're downrange, there's no room for politics, prejudice, or personal agendas. There's only the mission and the lives of your teammates. If any of you can't accept that, there's the door. No one moved. Sarah hadn't expected them to, but she'd needed to establish the boundaries from the beginning. Now, I understand you've been operating without a permanent commander for 6 months. Major Reeves tells me you've maintained exceptional standards during that time, which speaks well of your professionalism and his leadership. I don't intend to come in here and change everything just to put my stamp on the unit. What works will continue to work. What doesn't work will be fixed, regardless of whose idea it was originally. She gestured to Major Reeves, who stepped forward with a briefing folder. Our first order of business is to review current operational requirements. I understand we have a potential mission developing in the Pacific Theater? For the next hour, Sarah immersed herself in the complex world of special operations planning. SEAL Team Bravo was being considered for a hostage rescue operation in the Philippines, where American contractors had been taken by Abu Sayyaf militants. The mission would require precision, speed, and the kind of seamless coordination that only came from absolute trust between team members. As the briefing progressed, Sarah could sense the team's evaluation of her shifting from skeptical to grudgingly impressed. She asked the right questions, identified potential problems that others had missed, and demonstrated a tactical understanding that came only from real combat experience. More importantly, she listened to input from the enlisted operators, treating their expertise with the same respect she showed her officers. Sergeant Martinez, she said to one of the team leaders, you've operated in that region before. What's your assessment of local security forces? Martinez, a compact man with intelligent dark eyes, straightened slightly. Ma'am, the Philippine Marines are motivated but under-equipped. They'll provide perimeter security and transportation, but I wouldn't count on them for the actual assault. Their communication equipment is unreliable, and their operational security is questionable. Recommendations? We plan for complete operational independence, ma'am. Assume we'll get no meaningful support from local forces and that our presence will be compromised within hours of arrival. Sarah nodded. It was the same assessment she'd reached, but she wanted to hear it from someone who'd been there. Agreed. Major Reeves, I want contingency plans for extraction without local support. Sergeant Martinez, I want your team to develop intelligence requirements for the mission area. Focus on things that satellite imagery can't tell us, local attitudes, militia activities, possible collaborators. The briefing continued for another 30 minutes, with Sarah gradually taking control of the planning process while incorporating input from throughout the team. By the time they broke for lunch, she could see that her stock had risen considerably in the eyes of her new subordinates. As the team filed out, Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Burke approached her. Burke was the senior enlisted man in the unit, a 20-year veteran whose opinion carried enormous weight with the operators. If he accepted her leadership, the rest would follow. If he didn't. Ma'am, could I have a word? Of course, Gunny. What's on your mind? Burke glanced around to ensure they were alone before speaking. I wanted you to know that someone's been asking questions about you, ma'am. Not official questions. Personal stuff. Sarah's attention sharpened. What kind of personal stuff? Your dating history, your family background, whether you've ever been married or had relationships with subordinates. The kind of dirt digging that usually means someone's planning a smear campaign. Any idea who's doing the digging? No, ma'am, but it's someone with access. They knew details about your service record that aren't in your public file. Things like the real reason you left your last assignment, the circumstances of your divorce 3 years ago. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Her divorce was a matter of public record, but the details were sealed by court order. Her ex-husband had been emotionally abusive, and the divorce proceedings had revealed a pattern of controlling behavior that would have destroyed his own military career if it had become widely known. Only a few people had access to those records. Gunny, I want you to pass the word quietly to the team. If anyone approaches them with questions about me, official or unofficial, I want to know about it immediately. No exceptions. Roger that, ma'am. And, Commander? For what it's worth, the team's willing to give you a chance. This morning went a long way toward establishing your credibility. After Burke left, Sarah found herself alone with Major Reeves in the briefing room. The maps and mission plans spread across the table seemed to mock her with their complexity. She'd thought the biggest challenge would be proving herself operationally. Instead, she was discovering that someone was actively working to undermine her before she could establish herself as a commander. Major, I need to share something with you about last night. She told him about the incident at O'Malley's, the 3 Marines who'd tried to compromise her, and the mysterious Captain Smith who'd orchestrated the attempt. Reeves listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. Son of a bitch, he muttered when she finished. Someone's really going all out to destroy you before you get established. The question is who and why. I represent a threat to someone, but I can't figure out who would have both the access and the motivation to go this far. Ma'am, with your permission, I'd like to do some digging of my own. I've got contacts throughout the intelligence community who owe me favors. Maybe I can trace where these inquiries are coming from. Do it, but be discreet. I don't want our mysterious adversary to know we're onto him yet. The rest of the afternoon was spent in routine briefings and administrative meetings, but Sarah's mind kept returning to the puzzle of her unknown enemy. Someone with access to classified personnel records, the authority to recruit enlisted men for illegal activities, and the motivation to prevent her from succeeding as SEAL Team Commander. It was a short list, but every name on it represented a formidable opponent. As evening approached, Sarah was reviewing operational reports when her secure phone rang. The caller ID showed Lieutenant Colonel Webb's number. Commander Chen, we've had a development in the investigation. Can you come to my office immediately? On my way, Colonel. 20 minutes later, Sarah sat across from Webb in his Spartan office, studying the photographs spread across his desk. They showed a Marine captain in aviator sunglasses, just as Torres had described. But what made her blood run cold was the name printed on the file tab, Captain James Morrison, Marine Aviation, currently assigned to Personnel Command. This is our Captain Smith, she asked. We believe so. Morrison has access to personnel records through his position at Personnel Command. He's also been assigned temporary duty at Camp Pendleton for the past week, ostensibly conducting routine reviews of aviation personnel files. Sarah studied Morrison's service record. Decorated pilot, clean disciplinary record, currently up for promotion to major. Nothing in his background suggested the kind of person who would orchestrate a blackmail scheme against a fellow officer. What's his motive, Colonel? This doesn't make sense. Webb's expression was grim. That's where it gets interesting, Commander. Captain Morrison's ex-wife recently filed a complaint alleging that he's been stalking her since their divorce. She's also claiming that he has a pattern of targeting women he perceives as threats to his career advancement. The pieces were starting to fit together in Sarah's mind. Morrison wasn't trying to destroy her for personal reasons. He saw her appointment as SEAL Team Commander as a threat to the natural order of things, a precedent that might limit opportunities for men like him. It was a twisted logic, but it explained the calculated nature of his attack. Where is he now? That's the problem, ma'am. Morrison signed out of his temporary duty assignment this afternoon, claiming a family emergency. He should be en route to his home station, but he never arrived. We've issued a bolo alert, but so far, no one's seen him. Sarah felt a familiar tightening in her stomach, the same sensation she'd experienced before enemy contact in Iraq. Morrison wasn't running away. He was repositioning for another attack, and, this time, he he might not rely on enlisted pawns to do his dirty work. "Colonel, I want security increased around the SEAL compound immediately." If Morrison is willing to go this far, he might be desperate enough to try something more direct. "Already done, ma'am. I've also notified base security to be on the lookout for him. But, I have to ask, is there anywhere else he might target? Family, friends, former associates?" Sarah thought about her parents in California, her sister in Colorado, the handful of close friends scattered across various military installations. Morrison had access to personnel records, which meant he knew where all of them lived and worked. "I'll make some calls, warn the people who might be at risk. But, Colonel, I want to make something clear. I'm not going into hiding because some unstable pilot has decided I'm a threat to his worldview. SEAL Team Bravo has a mission to prepare for, and I intend to do my job." Webb nodded approvingly. "I wouldn't expect anything else from you, Commander. But, I want you to be careful. Morrison's psychological profile suggests he's capable of escalation if his initial plans fail." As Sarah drove back to her quarters that evening, she found herself checking her rearview mirror more frequently than usual. Morrison was out there somewhere, planning his next move. But, she'd faced worse enemies in worse places, and she'd survived by being smarter, faster, and more determined than they were. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new tests of her leadership. But, tonight, she needed to prepare for a more immediate threat, a desperate man with nothing left to lose and a grudge against everything she represented. It was going to be a long night. The attack came at 0347 hours, during the darkest part of the night when human alertness was at its lowest ebb. Commander Sarah Chen was deep in tactical sleep when her training kicked in, yanking her from unconsciousness to full awareness in less than 2 seconds. Something had triggered her subconscious alarm system, a sound that didn't belong, a vibration that felt wrong, or maybe just the sixth sense that had kept her alive through 2 combat deployments. She rolled out of bed silently, grabbing the Sig Sauer P320 from her nightstand while her bare feet found the cool hardwood floor. The base housing unit she'd been assigned was standard military construction, solid but not particularly secure against someone with the right skills and motivation. Through the bedroom window, she could see the perimeter.